You think you love saving money, but most of the time, you're not saving anything. You're just buying things faster. And the most dangerous part? Your brain will call it financial responsibility while it quietly drains your future. Here's the uncomfortable truth. A discount doesn't just change the price. It changes your brain. It changes how you judge value, how you feel urgency, how you justify spending. And once you understand what's really happening inside your head when you see 40% OFF, you'll never look at deals the same way again, because this isn't about shopping, it's about control. And most people have less of it than they think. That's the part nobody wants to admit. Most people believe something simple. If I bought it on sale, I made a smart money decision. That sounds reasonable. It even sounds responsible. But in many cases, it's financially false, because price is not the same thing as value. And discounts are very good at making you forget that. If you buy something for $70 that you never needed, you did not save $30, you spent $70. That's not a saving strategy. That's a marketing victory. And yet millions of intelligent adults fall for this every week, not because they're careless, not because they're bad with money, but because the human brain was not designed to evaluate modern pricing systems objectively. It was designed to react quickly, emotionally, socially, and retailers know that better than most consumers do. This isn't a willpower problem, it's a design problem. Let's get more precise. When you say a sale, your brain doesn't process it as an object with a lower price. It processes it as an opportunity that may disappear. That difference changes everything, because your brain is not a calculator. It's a prediction machine. It's constantly asking, is this useful? Is this rare? Is this urgent? Will I regret missing this? And sales activate all for at once. That's why limited time offer is so powerful. That's why countdown timers work. That's why only to left feels weirdly personal. You're not responding to math. You're responding to threat. A sale hijacks the same systems involved in reward anticipation, fear of loss, and future regret, not because the item is important, but because your brain hates the idea of missing an advantage. And once that feeling kicks in, logic starts getting edited. Not removed, edited. That's why your internal dialogue sounds so convincing. I'll probably need this later. I'd be stupid not to buy it now. It's basically free at this price. I'm saving money by spending today. That last sentence should bother you, because it's one of the most expensive lies in personal finance. Here's what's happening under the hood. When you spot a deal, your brain often treats it like a reward prediction opportunity. Not just I get a product, but I beat the system. That feeling matters a lot because humans don't only buy objects. We buy emotional experiences. And a sale gives you several at once. A sense of winning, a sense of urgency, a sense of control, and a sense of being smart. That's an addictive combination. The product becomes secondary. The emotional payoff becomes primary. This is why some people feel a rush when they buy something discounted and then feel almost nothing when it arrives. Because what they were really buying was not the item. It was the dopamine-loaded moment of acquisition. Not ownership. Acquisition. That's a huge distinction. Ownership is often boring. Acquisition is exciting. And modern consumer culture is built around that difference. Your brain doesn't chase the thing. IT chases the feeling before the thing. That's why your interest often fades right after checkout. The brain is most activated by anticipation, not possession. That's true in food, in dating, in social media, and yes, in spending. Now let's talk about one of the oldest tricks in pricing psychology, anchoring. This is where your brain sees the original price first, and uses that as the reference point. So if a jacket says, was $180 gives now $89, your brain doesn't start with, do I need this jacket? It starts with, wow, that's a huge drop. That is not a small mistake. That is the whole game. Because the moment your attention shifts from need to discount, you've already lost the frame. Now you're not evaluating the product. You're evaluating the deal. And those are not the same question. One is rational. The other is emotional. This is why smart people overspend. Not because they can't do math, but because they're doing the wrong math. They're calculating percentage saved, when they should be calculating life value gained. Those are two completely different systems. And retailers only need you to confuse them for a few seconds. Ts'al. If they can change the question in your mind, they can change the decision. Here's the painful truth. A lot of deal shopping is not about saving money. It's about emotional self-soothing with a socially acceptable excuse. Said Stings. Because most people don't want to think of themselves as emotional spenders. They want to think, I'm practical, I'm strategic, I'm careful with money. But if your spending increases every time life feels uncertain, stressful, lonely, boring, or overwhelming, then is IS&T really about price? It's about regulation. Emotional regulation. And shopping is one of the cleanest coping mechanisms in modern life because it doesn't look destructive at first. It looks normal, even productive. You're not spiraling. You're just buying a skincare bundle, a kitchen gadget to hoodies, and a standing desk organizer because they were all on sale. See how civilized that sounds? That's the danger. Because some bad habits don't feel like sabotage. They feel like adulthood. The most expensive habits are often the ones that look responsible. Let's make this painfully real. Imagine it's late November in the US, you're tired. You've had a long work week. Your inbox is full. Your phone is lighting up with Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and exclusive member pricing. Every app is telling you this is the smartest time to buy. And the culture reinforces it. Co-workers are talking about what they grabbed. TikTok is full of best Amazon finds. Your favorite creator is posting must-have deals. Now, your brain isn't just processing price. It's processing social proof. And social proof is incredibly powerful because the brain often interprets popularity as safety. If everyone it must be okay. That's why sales spending often feels less like spending and more like participation. You're not just buying AirPods, cookware, or a walking pad. You're joining the moment. That's one reason US holiday shopping is so psychologically intense. The National Retail Federation projected that holiday spending in November and December 2025 would top $1 trillion, and later reported the season landed near the top of that forecast. In other words, this isn't a side behavior. It's a national ritual. And here's what makes it more dangerous. When a behavior is culturally normalized, your brain stops treating it like a risk. It starts treating it like routine. Routine is where budgets quietly die. Here's a number worth sitting with. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York reported that US credit card balances reached $1.3 trillion in Q3 2025. That number matters. Not because debt automatically means failure, but because it reveals something deeper. A huge percentage of spending decisions are not happening in the clean, rational world of I can afford this. They're happening in the blurry world of I'll deal with it later. And later is where financial stress compounds, because your brain discounts future pain. That's one of its favorite tricks. Today's deal feels vivid. Next month's statement feels abstract. And the brain almost always chooses vivid over abstract. That is not stupidity. That is default human wiring. Which is why just be disciplined is terrible financial advice. Discipline is fragile. Systems are durable. And if your financial life depends on constantly resisting a machine built to outsmart your nervous system, you do not have a plan. You have a hope. Let's go one layer deeper. A lot of sale purchases are not driven by greed. They're driven by exhaustion. This is especially true in American life, where so many people are overworked, overstimulated, and underrested. When your brain is tired, it becomes more vulnerable to short-term rewards. Not because you become irrational, but because your cognitive control gets weaker. Decision fatigue is real. After a long day, the brain doesn't want to analyze. It wants relief, and discounted consumption feels like relief. A tiny hit of novelty, a little emotional lift, a symbolic reward for surviving the week, which is why so many purchases happen at night, or after stressful work days, or after emotionally draining interactions. Not randomly, predictably. And this is where people get confused. Because they think the problem is liking nice things. It's not. You are allowed to enjoy your money. That's not the issue. The issue is when your spending becomes your recovery mechanism. Because then you're not using money to build a life. You're using money to temporarily anesthetize one. If your budget collapses every time your nervous system is tired, your real problem isn't money, it's frictionless coping. There's another psychological trap here: identity. Many people don't just buy sales. They identify as the kind of person who never pays full price, and that identity feels financially intelligent. But identities can become blind spots. Because once you see yourself as a smart shopper, you stop asking whether the purchase itself was smart. You assume it was. The deal becomes your evidence. This is how highly capable people rationalize dumb spending. Not because they lack intelligence, but because intelligence can become a better lawyer for your impulses, not a better judge. You don't need a lower IQ to overspend. Sometimes you just need a more sophisticated story. And your brain is excellent at storytelling when money is involved, especially if the story protects your self-image. That's why behavior change gets easier when you stop asking, "How do I become more disciplined?" and start asking, "What kind of situations make me lie to myself?" That's a much more useful question, and a much more honest one. So what actually works? Not guilt, not shame, not no spend forever, and definitely not relying on motivation. Motivation is too unstable for an environment this optimized. What works is system design. You need to make bad spending decisions harder before the emotional moment arrives. Because once the sale page is open and your brain is already justifying the purchase, you are negotiating from a weak position. So instead of trying to become stronger in the moment, build a system that makes the moment less dangerous. Here's a practical framework. System 1, the 40 Tower Rule. If it's not essential, it doesn't get bought the same day. Simple. Not because time magically makes you wiser, but because urgency is often the illusion doing the selling. If the desire survives 48 hours, it might be real. If it disappears, it was probably emotional weather, not genuine value. And emotional weather should never control permanent financial decisions. You have to buy it fast. There's a good chance it's buying you. Système to serrer à tes frictions and PRPO to remove saved credit cards. Log out of shopping apps. Delete shop pay one-click checkouts. Unsubscribe from sale emails. Mute retail push notifications. This sounds small. It's not. Tiny friction creates thinking space. And thinking space is where better money decisions live, because many bad purchases are not deeply considered. They are simply too easy. The easier a behavior is, the less your brain questions it. So if you want better spending habits, stop making spending frictionless. Convenience is not always your friend. Sometimes convenience is just temptation with better branding. System 3 use a life cost filter. Before buying anything on sale, ask one question: what problem in my real life does this actually solve? Not hypothetically, not aesthetically, not aspirationally, actually, because many purchases are for fantasy selves. The organized self, the gym self, the minimalist self, the entrepreneur self, the this year I'm different self, and those selves are expensive. If the item only makes sense in a future version of you that hasn't shown up consistently, that's not an investment. That's identity theater. Brutal, but useful. System 4 Pre-Commit a Deal Budget. This one's underrated. Instead of trying to avoid all temptation, create a fixed impulse and deals budget every month. Maybe it's $50. Maybe it's $100, maybe it's $200 depending on your income. But once it's gone, it's gone. Why does this work? Because the brain behaves better with boundaries than with vague intentions. Be More Careful is not a system. $75 max for non-planned sale purchases is a system. One is a mood. The other is architecture. Always choose architecture. A lot of people think being good with money means getting the best price. That's too shallow. Being good with money is not about maximizing discounts. It's about minimizing regret. And regret usually doesn't come from paying full price for what you truly use. It comes from buying too many things that were emotionally compelling and practically forgettable. That's the real leak. Not one giant reckless purchase, but 1,000 small justified ones. And those are the hardest to fix because each one feels harmless. This is why so many people say, I don't know where my money goes. They know where some of it goes. They just don't emotionally register the small leaks because each one came with a story that felt reasonable. This is why tracking matters. Not because tracking is fun. It's not. But because untracked behavior becomes mythologized behavior. You think you're pretty good with money because your brain remembers the responsible moments and conveniently softens the impulsive ones. Memory is not bookkeeping, and self-perception is not evidence. At the deepest level, this conversation isn't really about sale signs. It's about whether you own your attention, or whether your attention is constantly being rented by systems designed to monetize your impulses. That's the modern financial battle. Not just earning more, not just investing better, but protecting your mind from environments engineered to convert emotion into transactions. Because if someone can repeatedly manipulate what feels urgent to you, they can quietly shape your future. One click at a time. One deal at a time. One rationalization at a time. That's why personal finance is never just math. It's identity, it's environment, it's emotion, it's time preference, it's self-awareness, and most importantly, it's power. Money doesn't just follow what you value. IT follows what hijacks your attention. That might be the whole game. So next time you see 50% OFF, don't ask, how much am I saving? Ask, what is this trying to make me feel? And why is that feeling so persuasive right now? That question alone will save you more money than most budgeting apps. Because the real upgrade is not becoming someone who never spends. It's becoming someone who can tell the difference between a useful purchase and a well-designed temptation. That difference is financial maturity. And almost nobody teaches it, because the truth is, sales are only one layer of the problem. The deeper problem is that your brain is also terrible at understanding small daily spending. Not the obvious stuff. The invisible stuff. The subscriptions. The just this once spending. The convenience, purchases that feel tiny but quietly shape your financial future. And that's exactly what we're breaking down in the next video. Why your brain ignores small expenses, even when they're keeping you broke. If you want to understand money at the level where behavior actually changes, watch that next. Because better finances don't start with more information. They start with better awareness.